Welcome back to the Sovereign Kitchen Society. I'm Molly Bravo. Today we are exploring what it means to eat and live with authenticity. My guest, Dr. Janna Tamargo, is a sociologist, a traveler, and the founder of AuthenticFood.com, where she studies how food connects culture, identity, and belonging. Her research took her deep into the meyhanes of Istanbul, ancient taverns where meals stretch for hours, filled with wine, music, and conversation. And it was in these very taverns that she began to ask, what makes food authentic? This, my friends, is where our worlds intersect. Because the work that we do here on the Sovereign Kitchen Society is about remembering who we are through what we eat. Whether it's a jar of preserved peaches or your grandmother's stew, authentic food and real food are part of the same lineage. They're a way of preserving the wisdom of our elders for the next generation. So hunker on in and let's talk about the stories, traditions, and human connections that make food truly real. Janna, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I love the opening. That was great.
Thank you. What I really love about what you're doing is that you're telling stories through food. And I was hoping that you might be able to just set the stage with your experience when you first stepped into the meyhane culture, kind of giving us a sense of like what it felt like, what the smells were like, what the food was like, the vibe, and what your experience was like in dining there and how different it is from what we're experiencing in the United States.
Yeah, sure. And I love that you're wanting to talk about meyhane culture because, I mean, that's basically what drove me into getting into authenticity in food. I was doing some coursework in Istanbul at Boğaziçi University, and we had an ethnographic project due, and we had to pick any restaurant in Istanbul. And I just happened to pick this restaurant that was right next to my apartment. I mean, unbeknownst to me what this restaurant was, I just thought it was a normal Turkish restaurant, whatever that was. I started going and then I started doing the research on this restaurant and I realized that this type of restaurant had existed since the Byzantine era. And so I start writing this paper and I turn it in and my Turkish professor was like, oh my gosh, like, do you understand what meyhane culture is? And I was like, of course not. Like, I'm an American woman. Like, I don't. But it was started as a men's only type restaurant. And so for him, he said to read these words from this very Western view and from a woman as well, right? In a place that's very male dominated. He was like, I've never heard it laid out and researched the lens that you took understanding it. As far as modern meyhane culture, I think what was so fascinating with so many people would constantly be telling me, oh, don't go to this meyhane, it's not authentic, or don't go here, it's not authentic. And I would be like, well, how can any of them be authentic? Because now women go there, right? There are a few meyhane that exist in Istanbul that are male-only spaces, but it's funny how people got so passionate about this word authentic when I would talk about going to a certain restaurant, you know? I think you asked about what it was like being in meyhane. Meyhane is like a subculture in Turkish culture because it is a drinking culture. And in a country that's 99% Muslim, a drinking culture seems a little obscure, but it's a very welcoming place. They welcome all types of people, all religions and beliefs. And when you're at the meyhane table, it's very leveling. And it's not uncommon to see men at meyhane tables. I don't usually think of many times I go out to restaurants and you see like large groups of men eating a meal together. But in meyhane culture, this is the norm. But now you will see couples hanging out in meyhanes, and there are some woman-owned meyhanes in Istanbul today. So being able to research something that has such a long history that existed through the Byzantine era And then the Ottoman Empire, where alcohol was illegal, but they still had alcohol in Meyhane. They were given special licenses to have alcohol. It's very interesting to see how something has evolved but still stayed so relevant and authentic at the same time. And I think it goes back to kind of what you're interested in about how these food traditions kind of endure and why they're so important to kind of understand, because we're losing a lot of them and we don't even really realize. And so with that being said, Mehane culture is nothing like anything in the States. People sit there for hours and hours and hours and eat small like meze plates, kind of like tapas, and drink. The meyhane actually means wine house in Persian, but now in meyhane, the biggest drink is rakı, which is a spirit in Turkey. It's kind of like the tequila to Mexico, rakı is to Turkey, right? And it's a drink that's flavored like anise. And it's very interesting because when you pour it, it's clear liquid. But when you add water or ice to it, it gets cloudy because the oil from the anise emulsifies. You drink it in a little shot glass and you just sip it very, very slowly because it's very strong. There are movies about meyhane culture. There are books about meyhane. There are songs about meyhane. It is its own little subculture that exists in Turkey, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Janna, give us a little taste of what the vibe's like in the meyhanes, because I imagine it's part of the allure that people are sipping on this really strong alcohol and it's kind of loosening them up. And then they're having really intellectual or deep conversation while slowly eating. I'd also love to know what it is like in terms of having a non-rushed atmosphere and how they actually even make money, because that would never happen in the United States.
Yeah, but we're such a capitalist type country here. I mean, it's very unusual in the United States to go to a restaurant and find the actual owner at the restaurant, right? And in a lot of countries, that is the norm. Like, you go to a restaurant and the owner is there. Sometimes they're sitting there just eating, or they're helping people in the restaurant. In meyhane, that is very common. A lot of people will actually open a meyhane because they want a place to meet their friends and hang out. And there, on any given night, you could probably show up and the owner of the meyhane will be there, and probably their family will be there too. I've had many friends, and I interviewed tons of meyhane owners when I was doing my research. And I even interviewed one of their sons, a very famous meyhane in Istanbul. The owner has since passed away, and I interviewed his son. And he was talking about how he remembers falling asleep in chairs at meyhane, right? Like little kids sitting around just in chairs waiting for their parents because they're hanging out at the meyhane until late at night. In Europe, this is very common, having children out very late at dinners. American culture, we not so much, right? If you have your kids out late, people are staring at you like, get those kids to bed. These social, cultural differences are very prevalent when you start traveling a lot. And especially for me, if I'm doing like a lot of like ethnographic or field work or field notes, a lot of these things really stick out. And meyhane culture is that kind of culture where lingering at the table is not considered rude. And actually with the economy in Turkey, a lot of changes have happened in meyhane where they started letting people bring their own alcohol because the alcohol taxes had gotten so expensive. Meyhane owners really just want to create a space where people feel safe and they can come and gather and talk and be open and express themselves. I don't think, and this is totally a generalization, that it's motivated by pure profit like you would find in the restaurant industry in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a lot of art that's taking place at the meyhane?
On any given night, if you go to some of the most famous meyhanes, you can find famous actors, you can find famous musicians, artists. Yes, you will find a lot of that in meyhane. But like I said, meyhane has evolved. I mean, now you have women going for ladies' night to meyhane, which, is so progressive from how meyhane started. And you have women that own meyhanes. There's a very famous mehane that just got on Michelin Guide, and it's owned by a woman, and she's amazing, amazing chef. I mean, I've had her food several times, and I'm friends with her now. I interviewed her for some of my research. Watching that evolution of mehane has been really fascinating, even into the past decade since I started going to Turkey. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves, and just the fact that it has maintained is just, I mean, phenomenal. How it has not deteriorated, and it's really kept up as the core idea. What started originally mehane culture was you had a lot of ships coming through the Bosphorus with products, and they would stop in Istanbul and they would throw things off the boat at the dock, and they would just eat on crates, and they would pull wine off the ships. And so you'd have these little makeshift taverns that were getting formed. And this was the very first mehane. People just pulling stuff off the ship, like olives and nuts and some wine. And like I said, this was a male only space because these were the men that were, on the ships, and they were just building these little tiny communities as they were getting off the ship. And then as it grew and the Ottoman Empire came, Sultan Suleiman was like, oh, well, I'll go ahead and let you keep this wine culture, right? But I'm going to tax this, and I'm going to charge you. You have to have a license to do it, because they wanted to appease the people that were coming in through shipping and things like that. So, and then again, evolved after that into the 70s, where now women are in the space too. Yeah, it's a very interesting case to study. I have to admit, I don't know many food cultures that are like it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love to think of it as that third place, like your home away from home, and people are creating it because they solely want to have a place to go and have great conversation and eat really good food and connect with the community. I think that's incredible.
In my master's thesis work, that's what I relate to is the third place. I don't know if you know, but third place is a concept that was started by a sociologist, Ray Oldenburg. And he came up with this idea that if a place had all of these certain characteristics, he is the one that coined the term third place. In my master's thesis work, I talk about it's really the first time in academic research where there's a relationship between authenticity in food and the third place. Mehane is the third place. I mean, I would equate it to like a Starbucks. If I could think of a place in America, it would probably be Starbucks. But I mean, Starbucks use that whole third place as their business model too. So they use Ray Oldenburg's work to build the concept of Starbucks.
Let's talk a little bit about your fascination with authenticity and how you correlated that with food and some of the adventures that you've been on, maybe the countries that you've been to, or reflecting on some of your favorite meals and how authenticity is related to the food that you're eating in these incredible places that you're going to.
What I think really got me into authenticity and authentic food, quote unquote, was I was traveling for work a lot, and I literally would go somewhere, and I might be in a country just one night, and I would go to the hotel concierge and say, hey, I just want to get something that's I could only get here, like I can only get in Australia. What would that look like? And then I remember the guy at the hotel was like, well, have you ever had kangaroo? And I was like, no. And he was like, well, that's probably something you can only get in Australia. And I was like, that seems very authentic. And so, but a lot of times I would go to concierges and they would send me to these places, and it wouldn't feel very authentic to me. Like it would just feel like it's some kind of commercialized, it's kind of like going, if someone said they wanted Australian food and they sent you to Outback, right? Like, so I started getting more intuitive when I would go to the concierge. I would say, well, would you eat there? Right? Because this is probably a local person. And they'd be like, well, maybe not, but I would eat here. And then I really started getting smart. I go, well, would your mom eat there? And they'd be like, no, she usually cooks at home. And I would say, well, if your mom would go out to eat for this food, like where would that be? When I was in Turkey and I started studying mehane culture, I got so fascinated with why people were getting so passionate about telling me this mehane is authentic. Don't go there. It was getting something that was on some deeper level of attachment well, what is authentic food anyway? Like, we hear it all the time. You see it everywhere. You see it outside of restaurants. You see it on, billboards or marquees. You see it on products. But I don't think we really take the time to think about what that means. And we sure as heck don't think about who has the power to influence that, right? Because when a restaurant owner puts authentic Mexican food on their sign, they have the power to tell you this is what it looks like. And if they're wrong, you're trusting them to give you an education. And sometimes that education is not the best, right? Like sometimes that gets convoluted in commercialism and things like that. So all of these things were heavy on my mind, and I ended up just enrolling on a couple of PhD programs just for fun. And I got in a few places and I thought, I want to know more. And then when I graduated, I remember I have two adult daughters, and they were kind of like, well, what are you going to do with your PhD? And I was just like, well, nothing. Like, it was a great experience. I learned so much about society and how we create this narration of authenticity. And they were like, well, you own a media company. You would think you could do something. And I was like, okay, I guess I will. And I did. So I launched authenticfood.com, and I thought I would share some of my work. Then it opened this bubble of this whole community of people that wanted to talk about food like you do, and recipes, right? Like, we don't talk about any recipes on authenticfood.com. We might talk about ingredients and things like that, but we don't share recipes. And I think there's a lot of bastardization of recipes that's gone on, time, for the good and for the bad. I mean, obviously, but I really wanted to focus on that depth of culture, depth of society, depth of meaning. And I felt like authenticity was so personal. And so we had all these writers that were interested in writing for us. And then it just kind of has morphed into what it is now. And we actually, we have a documentary series coming out, and we started our dinner series, which I absolutely am obsessed with.
Are you guys going to be traveling from location to location with this dinner series?
Yes. I think the goal is to basically bring this kind of authentic table overseas, some here in the United States. We just did the first one in my hometown in Jacksonville. But the idea is to bring the chef to the table, the chef, or even just the food purveyor or the farmer, and they actually sit and have a meal with you. So we give them some agency and a voice. And it was kind of started by the fact that I was going to a lot of dinners, and I would be sitting there having this amazing food. And sometimes, you would get a sheet with some of the stories about the behind the food and things. But it was always when the chef or whoever came out, everyone kind of wanted a little piece of them. And they're so exhausted from cooking, and they knew they had to get back in the kitchen, and so I thought, what if they're just at the table and eating with you, and you get to hang out with them? And I got a lot of great feedback on this first one. And the goal is to do some more and have some more great, great, authentic conversations around the table.
When I think about the word authenticity, well, first of all, there's something that I feel in my solar plexus when you explain authentic food. And what it takes me to is a feeling of nostalgia, of history, of an experience that people are really craving through food. And I feel like in the United States specifically, we have lost the story behind the food. It's very commercialized. There's no heart behind it. I do feel like we have that in the South. I think you still hold on to the family lineage. But when I think about the rest of the world, it's almost like dropping into a bubble where there is no time, and all you have is right here, right now, with the people that you're connecting with around a table. And food is the connector. It's the one common thing that you can bring to the table anywhere in the world, and it brings people together, and it creates conversation. So you can do like a lot of healing work around a table.
I totally agree with what you just said. For me personally, I think after COVID, it's like I felt even more disconnected than ever from people. I mean, despite the fact that, I can be on Instagram and see what everyone's doing, like, I feel like I don't know them, And of course, I think about what I put on my own Instagram and, all of my, the things that I put up are so curated, and some of my best moments don't get on Instagram, right? Like, that's the crazy part. And I still want to have those very like cathartic type long meals where you're just, being humans together. And maybe that isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I want it and I miss it. I see a lot of, younger kids, and you can barely get them to make a phone call. They
Right.
can't even make a phone call, and I feel really lucky because I've always had my kids around the table with me at a lot of places, and I see the difference in them sometimes with their friends. And yeah, I just worry about how disconnected we are despite having so many connections on social media. Just because you have 1 million people following you, it's like, but who really knows you? Who can you sit down with and have coffee with for 3 hours, or I don't know, meet at a bake shop, or those really simple, wholesome things that fill my cup.
When you're traveling, what is that like for you in terms of time? What is the culture like in these other places? And have you noticed a sense of them becoming more disconnected?
I think, I mean, of all the countries that I've been to, I would say probably US is the most disconnected I've ever been in. I have to say, last year I flew to Antarctica, and talk about connected. The people that live and work in Antarctica, I mean, that's a community. Like, I've never.
How many people are there? Is it like 30 people on a tiny little work
Depends on
team?
any given week and the season. Yeah, I remember going and thinking, okay, what is this going to be like? Like, we're all going to have our own individual experiences, but it wasn't like that. It was like instantly we were our own little community, because I flew in with just like 6 people, but then there's the people that live there and work there, and like the scientists, and there was a bar there. And we walk in the bar, and you would have thought we'd known these people for 30 years. Like, we ended up just hanging out with people. It was like one of the best times I've ever had. Like this, you knew you were out in the middle of nowhere, and if you didn't have each other, you didn't have anything. Like,
Yeah.
it was the most amazing. I mean, I literally flew home on that trip crying because it was just so. It was unbelievable. Like, it blew my mind. And then, when you're in other countries and you see these cultural shifts, I mean, I remember one time flying, I was in Egypt for a few days, and then I had to fly to Guadalajara, Mexico. And so that stark contrast of watching a country where women and men don't even look at each other, to going to Mexico where women and men are basically hanging out with each other, right? Like, it's a very passionate country, and you see, teenagers making out on the streets, to see those two very stark cultural differences, like, just from one extreme to another. I mean, it's very interesting. Some of my best experiences have been around the table at restaurants. I tell this story a lot. I was in Milan, and I had one more night, and I was at a hotel, and I asked them about getting something to eat, and I was just by myself. I told him I wasn't going to be back in Italy for a few months, and I wanted, a really good Italian meal. And the guy was like, let me call you in a minute in your room, and I'll see what I can do. So he calls me. He's like, okay, I got you a place. They'll come pick you up. And I'm like, okay, great. So this older gentleman comes to pick me up at the hotel. He takes me to this restaurant, which I found out later has been around since, I think, the 1800s maybe. And I found out later that he's the owner of the restaurant. Right. And there was a table next to me that had, I think, was 15 people at it. And they were just having a blast. I mean, everyone had an accent. I could tell no one was American, but they were all speaking English. And I walked past the table, and they were like, oh, are you here alone? You want to join us? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they're like, okay, but the caveat is you have to guess what nationalities we are, right? And I'm like, okay, which is one of my favorite games because I speak like almost 5 languages. So I was like, yes, I was made for this. And so I think I guessed like 7 of them because I mean, some of them were like Laos and like, some like very obscure. It wasn't like some of them weren't mainstream languages. And so I literally sat with them. I mean, all types of people. We talked about everything from religion to food to nationalism to sex to everything. And there wasn't a single argument at the table. They actually were a Emirates crew. They were on an overnight for an Emirates flight, and they had all come from all these different countries, but they were working on this Emirates plane. So that night has to be one of my favorite food moments ever because it was just so cathartic and real, and not to sound cliche, but authentic. But I've been lucky. I've had so many amazing nights over food or mornings, lunches in some just amazing places. I camped with Bedouin people in Jordan. A bunch of men cooked for us. Yeah, just everything that I think about that brings me joy has always had food in some aspect.
And when you think about authentic food, do you think that the authenticity comes more from the ingredients? Does it come from where you're at when you're eating these meals? Does it come from the conversation?
As a sociologist, I study authenticity through kind of a social constructionism lens as how you've had these experiences yourself that kind of translate what makes something authentic, right? So like another lens that I study authenticity through is symbolic interactionism. Things are symbolic to you in how you've interacted with them in society. All of those things that make you up as an individual play out into how you translate authentic food. As far as a sociologist and from a data standpoint, yes, these things are usually the data points that come up often, right? Like the ingredients, regionality, those things get associated with authenticity. But I think for me, at this very like granular level, maybe the gołąbki that my Polish grandfather made might be more authentic than someone else's Polish restaurant might make. I think it becomes very individualistic at that point. When I envisioned authenticfood.com, my fear was people were going to be like, oh, they're just going to tell us what's authentic and what isn't. And that wasn't the goal of authenticfood.com. The authenticfood.com was to open this dialogue about how we understand authenticity. And so when we hire writers, I'm like, look, we're not looking for some dichotomous go to a restaurant and tell us if it's authentic or not, because that's just not the dialogue that I wanted to have. I have this continuing conversation and that depth of knowledge of what that looks like and how we create ideas for ourselves, for society, for, the future, for the past, for traditions, culture.
I love the idea of, taking any of those avenues, whether it's taking an ingredient or like wanting to go and experience a certain place. And you use that as a doorway, but what it ends up doing is opening up a whole world to you because you get to hear the stories, the old grandmother that's making sweet little dumplings, where those recipes come from. The history of the ingredients, using those ingredients with love and reverence and respect. And you can just learn so much.
Over the summer, I taught an Italian food and culture course in Rome. And one of the first thing I said to my undergrads was, what do you think of when you think of Italian food? And they were like, tomatoes, this and that. And I'm like, okay, but you do realize that tomatoes are from America and they only came to Italy like in the last 100 years. Like they are relatively new to Italy. So now what do you think of if you think of Italian food, right? And they're like, what? What is Italian food, right? Does it really exist? Do we know what it is? I love these conversations for sure. I could talk about it all day.
When you reflect on all of the places that you've traveled, do you have a favorite meal that you've had that's just very connecting and lingering and conversation that's just blown your mind wide open and left you a different person?
That would have to be baklava because I have something with baklava.
I love that. I never would have expected that. That's so great.
There's a really good friend of mine who teaches at a university in Eskişehir in Turkey. And that's all he does is study like Ottoman food. We have these really deep conversations about baklava. But I consider myself like a baklava connoisseur. Like I can eat baklava and be like, oh, this is from this region. This is with walnuts. This is with honey. This is with sugar.
Love it.
Even when I went to Greece, like there's nothing I love more than stirring up the Greeks and the Turks on who invented baklava, right? Like I'll always like if I know someone from Greece, I'll always start this whole conversation about baklava, and then I'll do it with Turkish people too, because that to me is so fascinating. That whole dynamic about who invented baklava, and UNESCO came up with this one site in Turkey now that's like the home of baklava, has like the best baklava, and I've made baklava from scratch many ways, like from rolling the phyllo dough, like making it by hand, to buying it and then doing it. I've made it with honey. I've made it with sugar. I've made it all kinds of different things. But yeah, baklava to me is absolutely fascinating. I could write paper after paper about baklava.
I love that.
And no, even more recently, this is kind of funny, but we have an article coming out this week. And it's something I've been obsessed with for like years. But I don't know, have you heard about these Cosmic Crisp apples?
I have.
How
Yeah.
they like don't turn brown like fast like normal apples?
Interesting.
We have an article coming out on it this week, and I had wanted a writer to write a story about it for the past year, and I finally got a writer, Stasia. She's really great. She did this amazing article on Cosmic Crisp apples, and I'm just like, why am I so crazy about these apples? They're so crazy. I think it's because, I don't know about you, I mean, I'm in my 50s, but when I was growing up, there were only 3 kinds of apples. I don't know if you remember that, but there was like Red and Delicious, that yucky like yellow one,
Yeah.
and the Granny Smith.
Granny Smith. Yeah.
That was it, right?
Yeah.
There weren't other apples, right? And it takes years and years and years to create a new apple.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know why I got hung up on this whole apple thing, but so I'm really excited this article is finally coming out this week. So
Nice. And where can you get these apples? Where are they
Cosmic
grown?
Crisp apples, you can get them anywhere. The Cosmic Crisps are grown in Washington exclusively, but I know they have them like at Whole Foods. I don't know about any of the other grocery stores, but I do know Whole Foods has Cosmic Crisp apples. Food thing, are you obsessed? Do you have one thing that you're obsessed with?
Man, it took me a long time to discover my own unique voice through food. And when I first started cooking, I was copying people that I looked up to in the food world. And then my style kind of became more of like this rainbow cooking with lots of beautiful produce on the plate and bright citrus and fresh herbs and just nice and clean, really high-end olive oil. And what I'm really interested in now is taking like one specific thing. Like right now I'm working on sourdough. How can I just perfect the perfect sourdough? And that's where I'm at right now with food, is I just want to like become intimate with one specific ingredient, know it from the inside out. I'm really focused on like being present with that particular ingredient or that particular dish, whether it's making a bone broth from scratch, like understanding all of the different processes that take place in creating that specific dish. I'm just taking a step back, simplifying every aspect of the cooking process for myself, and I'm learning on a whole new level. And I think now I am fascinated by just like really good home cooking. When I look at what's happening in the United States, fine dining was really popular for a long time, cooking with foam or whatever, gastronomy, whatever it is. And I think that's really great, and it's a great artistic expression. But I think what people are craving now is simplicity, super high quality ingredients where you know who is growing that food, where it comes from.
Yeah.
Then when you're tasting a dish, you can actually feel the love that is put into that particular dish. So like when I'm listening to you talk about authentic food, that is what I feel when I'm listening to you tell these stories of all these incredible places that you've visited. in the world and the relationships. It's all about the relationship that you're building with people through food. Like, it lights me up, girl. I love it. I could go so deep on that, you know?
I feel really lucky. There are a lot of countries I could drop into right now and have an amazing meal with somebody that I know. And I feel just unbelievably lucky at times. But I'm with you. I love that simple. And I love that you said sourdough, because I literally want to I want to have a relationship with sourdough so bad. It seems so easy. I took this sourdough class from this amazing baker in the UK, and she is just so amazing. I spent all day with her. And she literally pulls out this 150-year-old starter. And I was like, no, I'm not going to take that. I'm intimidated. I was like, and she ended up sending me home with some dehydrated starter. I have not even done anything with it because I'm so scared to kill it. It seems so easy. You have just these very simple ingredients, but it really is an art form.
Then you think about 150-year-old sourdough starter. How do you do that? How do you care for something that long?
What to do was to baby your sourdough.
Totally. But there's a nurturing aspect to that, you know? And of course, you know that whoever's going to eat that sourdough is going to feel that love that has been put into that starter.
You can have this amazing bread. And I mean, it's amazing. And you just have these few ingredients, just a couple ingredients. Yet you go to the grocery store and you try to buy a loaf of bread and it's got 15 million different things in it. And you're just like, what am I even putting in my body when I can go home and get some flour and water and make some bread?
And the missing ingredient in all of that is heart. It's like the love that you're putting into that dish. So when you're traveling to all of these places, I mean, that is the one ingredient that they all still infuse into every restaurant that they have, every dish that they create. Is there's not a rushed experience in the food world. I mean, across the world, except really in the United States. It's very rushed. It's very thoughtless.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I hope that authentic food can slow that down a little bit. I love these very granular food stories.
Yeah, I do too. I would love it if you could share about the new dining series that you're starting and let people know if there's anything that you want to highlight about projects that you're working on, whether it's the docuseries or the meals that you're creating. And then lastly, how people can find you.
As far as the dinner series, The Authentic Table just launched last month. And we'll just have more information on the website, which is authenticfood.com. And we have an events page. So any events, you can find out information there. And of course, we have our Instagram, which is Authentic Food Insta. And then I have my Substack, which is Authentic Foodie. Most of our stuff we put out on Instagram or LinkedIn. We advise you to sign up for our newsletter if you want any first dibs on any opportunities we have coming up. And we do giveaways too. I try to give away a $100 Visa card every 3 months so that people can go out and have their own authentic food experience.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that it has been such a pleasure, Janna. What a powerful conversation. Janna reminds us that authenticity isn't something that you can brand or package. It's actually something that you live. It's found in the slowness of a meal, the rhythm of conversation, and the simple act of gathering with others in gratitude. The Meyhanes of Istanbul might seem far away, but the culture they represent, lingering over food, laughing with strangers, turning meals into shared stories, feels like something America desperately needs right now. In a time of turmoil and noise where division runs deep, that kind of table feels revolutionary. When we sit down together side by side, instead of screen to screen, we remember that we're not as different as we've been told. We still crave the same things: good food, belonging, beauty, and meaning. And that's the essence of what we're doing right here at the Sovereign Kitchen Society. We're rebuilding the communal table. We're reclaiming the art of feeding one another and finding common ground through the language of real food. Every jar we fill, every meal that we make, every story that we preserve is all part of restoring connection to a disconnected world. If this conversation resonated with you, I would love for you to join us. Follow our community on Substack at the Sovereign Kitchen Society for essays, recipes, reflections that keep these stories alive. And if you're ready to start learning the old world skills that ground and sustain us, pick up a copy of the Essential Canning Cookbook. It's a practical guide to real food for the modern kitchen. Inside, you'll find more than just recipes. You're going to find a path back to rhythm, resilience, and the joy of feeding the people that you love. Authentic food and real food are all part of the same story. It's a story about remembering who we are and who we could be if we just keep coming back to the table. So until next time, please remember that food is and always will be our medium for connection.